Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us today for our webinar, Income Volatility in Canada, Why It Matters and What to Do with It. We're going to get started today, and thank you for joining us. Before we get into our presentation, we'll just take you through some quick logistics. Everyone in the audience, you've been put on mute for the webinar, but that doesn't mean we don't want to hear from you. Please share any questions you have at any time in the question box at the right-hand side of your screen. We'll be taking questions at the end of the webinar, so as soon as you think of something, please feel free to type it in, and we'll see how many we can get to at the end. As a registered participant on today's webinar, you will receive a copy of the slides and a copy of the video recording after the session is complete. We'll send you that out within a couple of days. So don't worry if anyone here who may not have been able to join you today would like to catch up, they will be able to do so. Finally, we will be live tweeting this webinar, so if you are on Twitter, please join us with the hashtag ProsperWebinar, and we are on Twitter at ProsperCan. My name is Glenna Harris, and I am joined today by Liz Mulholland, our CEO here at Prosper Canada. We are honored to be hosting this session with you today. We work with partners in all sectors to ensure that all Canadians, regardless of their income, have access to financial programs, products, services, and advice they need to build their financial well-being. We're interested in breaking down barriers to financial well-being and to better understand the realities of financial vulnerability so that these challenges can be addressed. Income volatility in Canada is certainly one such challenge, and we're pleased to dive into this topic with you today. We have a full agenda for you over the next hour. First, we'll talk a bit about what income volatility is, and then Liz will take us through some important findings from the report Pervasive and Profound, recently released by TD. This is an emerging area of research, and there's a lot of great information in this report. And then Liz will address some of the potential solutions to the challenge of income volatility. And we'll conclude with a few minutes for questions, as well as recommend some resources where you can read more on this topic. So this will be the coming hour. So let's get started. So first of all, what do we mean by income volatility? Well, we'd like to get started with a quick poll to get your thoughts on what you think we mean. So we've got a poll with 4 potential answers here. What do we mean by income volatility? Would you say that this is about having very different income from month to month, having income that is unpredictable, having a lot of spikes and dips in income, or all of the above? Please click one of the answers, the one that you think best answers the question. How would you answer, what do we mean by income volatility? We'll give you 20 more seconds. All right, so we'll close this in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Thank you for your responses. So the results we can see are the vast majority of you answered all of the above, which is in fact the correct answer. Income volatility is a situation which encompasses all of these situations. It's a bit of a challenge to understand it from that angle, which is why we're going to get into all the different causes of how income volatility happens. But essentially, yes, income volatility can look like all 3 of these situations, having different income month to month, having income that is hard to predict, and having a lot of spikes and dips in income over time. So we're going to look at this in a little bit more detail. This kind of income volatility situation is something that we can see happening month to month. Pardon me. I'm just going to make sure I can close the poll here. Oh, sweet. Pardon me, folks. We're just encountering a brief technical difficulty here. We just want to make sure you can see the slides as we are showing them to you. Thank you very much for your patience. The real challenge with income volatility is not just knowing what it is, but how to measure it. So income volatility is something that happens over a long period of time, and understanding it month to month, not just year by year, is a new aspect for tracking economic household data. And one of the major challenges for households experiencing income volatility is that it can be very much more difficult to budget. It can be harder to plan for the future and to save. So this is an emerging field for us in Canada. Much of the research that we are learning from has come to us from the United States. We can see on this chart here from the Aspen Institute. This is a chart showing 2 years, month to month, of household income data for a sample household. And you can see that there's a line through the middle there that indicates average income, but in actual reality, the month-to-month income very rarely hits that average income line. Most months for this household are significantly higher or lower than what the average income would tell us. And what we're learning from research in the United States is that this issue is increasing. Income volatility is especially high among low-income households, and it's increasing the most rapidly for low-income households. So this is a concern for us in several different ways. How is it happening? What are the main causes of income volatility? Most fall under one of three different categories: labor market earnings, non-labor transfers, and household composition. Labor market earnings, this is referring to changes in employment, changes in working hours, or any kind of income that's been gained from employment. So this could include losing a job, having seasonal employment, or other changes in employment that fluctuate throughout the year. Shift work, or upward swings like 3 paycheck months for households where the pay is biweekly. Non-labor transfers, in this case, we're talking about income that comes from public benefits or transfer payments, not from employment sources. These can affect income volatility in situations such as when payments might change in relation to your labor income. It could be a situation such as when EI coverage diminishes or is not even made available because the person has not worked enough hours to qualify for that program. And it can also cause income to spike at certain times of the year, for example, when income tax refunds are accessed. So some of these are dips and some of them are spikes. And finally, household composition influences financial situations. So marriage can be a financial support to a household, combining incomes, combining families. But divorce is often accompanied by financial hardship for the household. And as children grow and parents age, this can introduce changing care needs into the household, which can also greatly affect household income. So all of these are sources of change in income, either positive or negative, and all of these are causes of income volatility in a household. But certainly evidence suggests that the rise in precarious employment is one of the major causes. So it's the issues with labor market and employment earnings that are the most to blame for irregular income. Precarious employment is defined by irregular scheduling and irregular wages, and this can include work such as casual labor, shift work, seasonal labor, freelance or contract work. It can include self-employment, part-time work, or selling goods and services through online platforms, which has been increasing, especially in the last few years. And some of these can improve income levels in a household. They can often lead to spikes when they're used to supplement income that is steady but insufficient. But the reality is that for many people living in North America, those side employment income opportunities are actually the major part of their income, not just a side benefit. So the takeaway here is that rising precarious employment means rising income volatility. So I'm going to turn things over to Liz, and she's going to look at why income volatility matters and take us through some of the recent research. So Liz, over to you.
Thanks very much, Glenna, and welcome everybody. It's great to have you with us today. Income volatility is a big problem because it adds substantially to the complexity of the already challenging task of managing our household finances. So we all know that we've been routinely told to make and follow a budget, to plan for our financial future, and to put aside money for emergencies, but also for the longer term, for retirement or longer term needs. All of this supposes, however, that you know how much money you will have each month. Income volatility means that you can't know how much money you'll have each month. As a result, households with moderate to high income volatility find it incredibly difficult to budget, plan, save, and to pay down debt in cases where households have debt. They're also more likely than other households to have to choose between letting bills and utilities, rents, mortgages go unpaid, or to have to borrow funds when their income dips below their monthly expenses. And for an increasing number of households at all income levels, actually, this includes turning to high-cost, high-risk payday lenders when other sources of credit have been exhausted. Income volatility is often accompanied by expense volatility as well, leading to what we call financial shocks that can increase financial stress on a household and also their financial instability. So this is kind of what we call the double whammy effect. Expense spikes can arise from such unexpected events as cars, appliances, or homes that need urgent repair, illness, infirmity, or a death in the family, both people or pets. I mean, if you have a dog and you have to go to the vet, it can cost a lot of money. Price increases for commodities if there's a spike in gas prices or food prices, and needing to move, which happens often for people who are low income. Spikes can also be associated with very predictable occurrences, but that doesn't make them that much more manageable if your income is volatile. So that may be a tax bill, your property tax, for example, tuition bill if you have children and pursuing post-secondary education or training, and holiday spending, that big spike that comes with our major holidays when gift giving hits. Spending also has an emotional and psychological element to it that is a bit unpredictable as well. We all know that that we're supposed to stay within our budgets, but we all have our quirks when it comes to spending money. So that can also have an impact. So income volatility alone, even without the expense volatility, but often the combination of the two, can have immediate and longer term consequences for households. So it has first and foremost a direct impact on people's financial costs, as they're much more likely to incur late fees and penalties on bills, to have to access expensive credit, and if they have lower credit scores, which often happens if you're not able to keep on top of your bills, that increases the rates that they pay for their financial products. Income volatility can also interfere with people's consumption in a more profound and destabilizing way. It can lead to food insecurity, difficulty affording medical prescriptions and care that you need to maintain your health or the health of a loved one. It can lead to repossession of assets like the family car, which can be very destabilizing for many people who rely on having a car to get to their employment. It can also result in utilities being cut off, your heat, your water, your power, and even to eviction, foreclosure, and in extreme cases, homelessness. Finally, income volatility complicates people's access to safety net programs for assistance, social assistance, EI, or the Canada Child Benefit, because beneficiaries are always required to report any change in income immediately or risk losing or having to repay benefits that they receive. So keeping benefit providers up to speed on incomes that fluctuate every month or every month or two can become a full-time job. If anyone who has ever had to call a government 1-800 number knows that it's never a quick task. And people that have income that fluctuates every week or every month find themselves, in order to comply with the rules and regulations, having to spend hours trying to reach government departments to update them, and often not even being able to get through. We're learning from many of our partners in the field. So at the same time, income spikes can lead to what we call benefit cliffs. This is when households suddenly lose their benefits because they exceeded a maximum income threshold briefly when their income had a spike. And frequently this means they have to go through an onerous process to reapply for the benefit and undergo a waiting period on top of that before their benefits can be reinstated. So you can see that the impact on families can be quite destabilizing. So as Glenna mentioned, we know a lot about income volatility from the experience in the United States, where they've done quite a bit of research on this topic. But what do we know about how big the problem is in Canada? Here, unlike the United States, we actually have no publicly available data we can use to measure and monitor income volatility rates and their impact on Canadian households. Inspired by the evidence generated in the US, however, the TD Bank kindly set out to investigate the extent of income volatility in Canada, its causes, and its impact. To do this, they commissioned a national public opinion survey of 3,000 adult Canadians, and they actually included an oversample for low-income Canadians living at or below the low-income cutoff threshold to make sure that they had a statistically valid sample for those households. And their findings were captured in the report, Pervasive and Profound, that Glenna mentioned earlier. And they shockingly showed that 37% of Canadians, or approximately 10 million individuals, are experiencing moderate to high income volatility month to month and lower overall financial health than other Canadians. 5 million, or 18% of these Canadians, are experiencing high or very high income volatility month over month, and 3.3 million are experiencing fluctuations of 25% or higher in their monthly income. And I have to say, when this data came through, not only was TD very shocked by it, but the polling firm was actually very shocked by it, Ipsos Reid, and they were baffled that they had never come across this issue before, and they are now actually tracking this. So kudos to Ipsos and TD for getting the ball rolling. But also what it tells us is that this issue is having a profound impact on many Canadians' lives, but at the same time is almost nowhere on the policy radar at the moment, or amongst financial institutions, which is very worrying, actually. So as Glenna mentioned, income volatility has multiple causes, but irregular work is really the most frequent. So when asked about the causes of volatility, respondents gave us a list of different reasons for why their income was going up and down, but irregular or changing hours of work, days of work was the most frequent cause in 28% of cases, This was followed by irregular income from what we call performance pay, tips, commissions, bonuses, was responsible in 19% of cases. Having to cobble together income from multiple jobs, and as Glenna said, many people actually don't have a full-time permanent job anymore. They're really combining incomes from multiple different sources, and these can all vary in their amounts each month. So that's 18% of respondents. And then 17% talked about having to rely on investment income. We also know that some Canadians are far more likely than others to experience income volatility. The biggest predictor, as we've said, is likely your employment status. So self-employed Canadians are really the ones who are the most at risk in this picture, with 75% of them responding that they're experiencing income volatility, moderate to high income volatility. This was followed by people who are seasonally employed at 68%, can't find work at 63%, and those working part-time and students at 57%. Age is also a major determinant of whether you're going to experience income volatility, and millennials are particularly affected. So these are Canadians who are age 18 to 34. And interestingly, mature Generation X men not to confuse with X-Men generally, who are aged 45 to 54, 47% of whom were affected by income volatility. And this is speculation at this point. It's a hypothesis. We don't for sure. But these may be, in the U.S., they've determined that these are men who were employed in manufacturing, blue-collar jobs, good quality jobs, and then with the demise of the manufacturing sector or its shrinkage, were forced to turn to precarious work. So that may be similar in Canada. Within the millennial group, some millennials are particularly affected. Young women are more likely to experience this problem. So 63% are experiencing income volatility, and younger millennials aged 18 to 24, almost 60% are also experiencing it. And we've mentioned this before, but income is another major determinant. So Canadians with incomes below the low income cutoff are most likely to be affected, 47% of them, followed by modest income Canadians with incomes under 40K, 45% of whom are affected. And where you live matters as well. We know that Canadians living in large cities have higher rates of income volatility, 40%. And interestingly, Canadians living in Alberta appear to be experiencing it. That may have something to do with the timing and with oil prices, et cetera, but we're not quite sure. So Canadians with low incomes are not only at higher risk of experiencing income volatility, but TD's research also showed that they feel its negative effects the most keenly. So over half of low-income Canadians, 51%, experiencing moderate, high, or very high income volatility feel they are falling behind financially versus just 37% of middle-income Canadians. Just under half of low-income Canadians have had to delay buying groceries in the past year because they couldn't afford them, so it's 49%, versus 35% of middle-income respondents. And 41% have been forced to delay paying their utility bills. Not surprisingly, this has resulted in 45% of low-income households who responded feeling highly stressed about their finances versus just 35% of middle-income Canadians. And I shouldn't say just 35%, because even 35% is a lot of middle-income Canadians feeling stress as well. So we can see that even though low-income Canadians are feeling the effects most sharply, that Canadians up the income scale are also feeling the effects of income volatility, and it's impacting negatively on their well-being as well as on their financial health. And to that point, all Canadians, the data showed that all Canadians affected by income volatility are more likely to have poorer overall financial health. So, and this was measured by looking at their behaviors related to spending, saving, borrowing, and planning. So all Canadians who are affected see themselves falling behind, are more likely to see themselves falling behind financially, to be less confident about their finances and their financial future, and to be more likely to report feeling high levels of stress around their finances. And those with higher income volatility tend to score lower across all four categories of financial health, but with the areas of saving and planning being the most negatively impacted. So, but we know that these are very important behaviors to build financial health. So without the capacity to save or to plan financially, it's very difficult to achieve any level of financial stability, let alone to improve your financial situation. Canadians with high income volatility also experience higher expense volatility. And this actually creates a rather toxic combination that together makes it almost impossible for some households to manage financially. As noted earlier, 61% of spending spikes are not associated with an income spike, and 1/3 occur when household income is below the monthly average. So what this tells us is that expense spikes are rarely accompanied by an income spike, which means they're the worst of all possible situations. And families in these situations often find themselves up against a financial wall with costly consequences. This wall typically takes the form of not being able to make ends meet, and this means foregoing basics like groceries, delaying paying your utility, rent, or mortgage bill, in the hopes that you'll be able to catch up in the following month. Alternatively, families have to borrow money, which could come at a very high price if their credit score is low, or if they carry a balance on their credit cards. Those who have to resort to payday lenders pays the most of all, and risk falling into spiraling debt traps that are difficult to escape later and extremely expensive. It should be said that, the backdrop for what we're finding around income volatility is that Canadian households are currently more indebted than they have ever been since we've tracked household debt in Canada. I think the rate is approximately 170% of annual household income right now. So people owe $1.67 for every dollar of income they have in a year. And savings are at historically very low levels as well. So, it's possible that income volatility is one of the major causes for this situation. It's not surprising, given these facts, that Canadians who experience more income volatility are much more likely to feel stressed about their finances, with 38 to 39% of those with high volatility also reporting very high levels of stress. Accompanying that stress is the feeling that they're also falling behind financially. So 45% of households with high income volatility feel like they're falling behind, and over half with very high income volatility feel like they're falling behind. This experience of working hard and losing ground financially has been identified by many commentators as a contributor to rising social and economic alienation in Western nations, and as a contributing factor to the current rise in populism. We don't have the expertise to assess the accuracy of those claims, but if it's true, then that's just another reason why we should be paying much closer attention to income volatility in Canada and focusing on ways to prevent it, or at least mitigate its impacts on Canadians. One can even say that there's a sense of urgency in the need to address this issue when you see that between 39 and 43% of Canadians with high or very high income volatility are afraid that they'll run out of money during their retirement. These numbers paint a very bleak picture for many Canadians who may legitimately wonder why their hard work is not paying off and whether it's actually possible to get ahead financially at all from where they stand today. In summary, income volatility is pervasive, and its impacts on the financial health and well-being of Canadians appear to be very profound, as TD has pointed out. The question then is what we should be doing about this important and growing problem, and whose job is it to fix it? We're actually going to try and answer that. So some people would say that the responsibility starts with the individual. So what can people do to prevent income volatility in their own lives, or at least to reduce its damaging effects? Well, the right job can make all the difference. The number of permanent full-time quality jobs continues to shrink, which means most people will have to turn to the next line of defense, which is saving. Liquid savings can help families smooth the periodic income expense gaps that come with income volatility, but income volatility makes it extremely hard for families to save, so this is often out of reach as well as a solution. Borrowing is the final line of defense, but it comes with a price and risk for families who may not be able to manage additional debt. So while these strategies are available to some Canadians, many others are still going to need help to deal with this problem. In the U.S., the Aspen Institute has been convening stakeholders from all sectors for over a year to build consensus on a solution framework to address income volatility in America. The emerging framework sets out a clear set of strategies and goals with roles for three key sectors: employers, financial providers, and governments. In Canada, none of these sectors is really fully mobilized yet around this issue, but some leaders in each sector are beginning to respond. So in Ontario, the government established a review of changing workplace, and they came out with a very comprehensive report, and the government has responded with a suite of labor market reforms that it is moving forward with. As well, they've actually launched a basic income pilot to look at the impact of providing a basic income to low-income and modest-income households, and whether this can be a way to help offset some of the instability arising from the labor market. At the federal level, we've seen expansions of the Canada Child Benefit and the CPP, which are both designed to provide more adequate and stable income to Canadian households. And at the same time, we've seen traditional financial institutions and emerging new fintech companies. Fintech is sort of the combination of technology applied to providing financial services and products. And these companies are often partnering with our banks and credit unions to provide customers with new tools, online tools to help them manage their increasingly challenging financial lives. And with the rise of artificial intelligence and machine learning, we're now seeing how these new technology tools can learn from the patterns in people's expenditures and saving habits, et cetera, to actually provide real-time proactive coaching to people on opportunities to save, how to stay on budget, et cetera. So take some of the complexity out of all those trade-off decisions that people are being forced to make every day and make it easier for people to pursue their financial goals and to manage in the face of the income volatility that they're experiencing. It's early days yet on many of these things yet, so a lot of them are still in development or just being tested out in the field. The strategies that Aspen has identified more broadly, next slide, fall along a spectrum from prevention to mitigation. So at the prevention end of the spectrum, which is really where you want to start because it's better to prevent the problem than have to solve it later, stable employment and pay are really the ideal solution to income volatility. So in Canada, as I mentioned, Ontario government is moving forward with labor market, legislative and regulatory reforms. And that's perhaps the best example we have in Canada of this approach. At the same time, these reforms are actually provoking a debate about the trade-offs between regulation to protect workers and reduce their social and economic risks, and the desire of businesses, on the other hand, to reduce costs and maintain flexibility to enhance or sustain their competitiveness. It's not clear that employers at this stage in Canada are fully aware of the income volatility issue or its impacts on employees, and this is definitely an area where more work is needed. And there can be some really important opportunities for employers themselves to behave in ways that will reduce income volatility for their employees. Canada's social safety net, this is the second strategy, can play a dual role in both preventing and mitigating the negative impacts of income volatility. So regular payments of income benefits to working age individuals and their households through programs like employment insurance, the Canada Child Benefit, or basic income, such as the one Ontario is piloting, can help to ensure a more predictable flow of at least a portion of a household's income. This is assuming that people can actually access the benefits they're entitled to, however. At Prosper Canada and through our partners, our many partners, we're learning more and more about the challenges many Canadians face in tax filing and pursuing other channels to access benefits they need and they're legally entitled to, but they can't access. Community organizations have begun mobilizing around this issue in collaboration with the Canada Revenue Agency, but a more robust response from our governments is really needed, and investment in scaling some innovative approaches if we're going to successfully connect Canadians with the over $1 billion in benefits that still go unclaimed each year. We also need to modernize programs like EI, social assistance, to take into account the fact that many households have incomes that fluctuate continuously, and they cannot wait 4 weeks for assistance, nor can they spend hours each week or month updating government agencies on their income changes. So we really have a social safety net that was built for the 20th century, not the 21st. And a very different labor market where people either had a full-time job or didn't have a full-time job. And now we know that's no longer the labor market that we live in and work in. So really the time has come where we need to look at a different approach. The final component or strategy for addressing income volatility is helping households maintain their liquidity, so helping them maintain some liquid savings or assets. And this is really the last line of defense in mitigating income volatility. So we know that liquid assets and savings are critical to every household's financial resilience up and down the income scale. So this component is really about helping families to build up emergency savings despite the many obstacles in their path. Initiatives can range from innovative apps and behavioral approaches that help people microsave to more intensive efforts to help people turn tax refunds into savings. So we know that for low and modest income families, when they file their taxes and they get their refund, it's often the only time in the year when they have a large lump sum payment of money that hasn't already been spent or spoken for. So this is an ideal time to put some money aside and to start to build up an emergency savings fund. At the same time, there are also new mechanisms that can enable individuals to customize the flow of pay for hours worked, for their bonuses or commissions, or the disbursement of their tax refunds over the year. And there's been, I think, more experimentation in the United States than Canada, but in the US, people can split their tax refund and have it flow over different times of the year. They could split it into different accounts. And also there are now apps and things that are coming out and approaches that employers can use to allow their employees to access their pay in a different way and to have more choices and options about how they want their compensation for the time that they've worked or for their bonuses and commissions to flow to them, so that they can use it, set it up in a way that it provides more predictability for them, and they can offset some of the dips in other sources of income. All of these efforts are really designed to give people more options, more control, and a greater chance of success when it comes to taming their income volatility. If we're going to be successful in Canada in understanding, preventing, and mitigating the impact of volatility, however, we need to be able to measure and monitor it and its effects. Unfortunately, we have no public data or research underway in Canada on this front. So job one is really to engage and inform policymakers and our leading public research institutions and financial institutions on the importance of this issue and the need to put proper research and monitoring mechanisms in place. At Prosper Canada, we're continuing to work with key partners like TD and IROC, the Investment Industry Regulatory Oversight Commission in Canada, to catalyze and undertake research in this area and to translate it into advice to financial educators, policymakers, financial institutions, and others who can play a role in addressing this issue. In parallel, we're continuing our efforts with community, government, and business partners to sustainably scale supports to help people tax file and access and maintain their benefits. Many of you are already playing an important role in this work, and we look forward to working with you to ensure everyone is able to access the income and benefits they're entitled to, and to advancing additional complementary solutions to the income volatility issue. I think we're now ready to take questions.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Liz. In fact, before we go to questions, we have one more quick poll for folks, because especially as we've been listening to all the great research information you've had to share with us, it's understandable that many of you listening may be thinking about your own work and your own clients that you support on a day-to-day basis. So if you were to think at a moment's notice to estimate about how many of the people you support, about how many would you estimate are living with income volatility? Would you say it's about a quarter, 25%, about half, 50%, about 3/4 or 75%? Or would you say that really pretty much all of the people you support are living with income volatility in some way? So we'll give you about 15 more seconds to click on a response. I see many of you are clicking in. That's great. So just click on the answer that you think best matches the people you support, perhaps in your community agency, perhaps you work in social service sector in some way, or perhaps an area of the finance industry. However you're supporting clients, how would you characterize? So we're going to close the poll in 3, 2, and 1. So let's see our results. So it looks like the majority is actually kind of split between 50, 75, and 100. About a third of you said actually all of your clients are living with income volatility. So that's a fairly striking number. And if we add that up to 24% of you said about 75, that means more than half of you are dealing with a client base that's very significantly affected by income volatility. So that's pretty significant for us to see in the field. The numbers from the TD report that you've been talking about, Liz, are reporting around 40% of Canadians, but actually the folks on the line, it's very much a saturated concern. So thank you so much for responding with your answer to that poll, and we look forward to getting more into these questions that you might be thinking about as you've been listening to the topic. So Liz, we have a couple of questions coming in.
Great.
We have a question on guaranteed income. What are your views on guaranteed income in light of all of this research?
Guaranteed income, basic income, I mean, there are many different variations on the theme, but I think there is a strong emerging line of thought that governments need to be actively investigating this as one way to address increasing precarity in the labor market and the effects of that, among them income volatility. So, as employers seek to have more flexible workforces, workers lose benefits, they lose stability, and often their income goes down. So all of that, when it's happening on a large scale, can be very destabilizing, not just for individuals, but for our communities. So I think people more and more are starting to look at basic and guaranteed income as one potential response to that. And I think also in particular, the technology sector are very strong advocates of this because they see further labor market disruption coming from the rise of artificial intelligence and automation of more jobs that they see in the future. So.
Thank you. That's great. And thank you for that question. We've got a couple more questions coming in, so let's keep on going. Do you know if there's anyone who right now is mobilizing, especially in Canada, around solutions from those sectors you highlighted? So you talked about employers and financial sector. Do you know of anyone yet in Canada who's starting to mobilize around solutions in these areas?
I think it's still early days yet in Canada, just because we haven't had the benefit of the data and the research that they've had in the United States. So we're still in the mode of trying to raise awareness around the issues around this. I would say the Ontario government is definitely far out ahead of other provincial governments in terms of having done a really thorough review of the impact of changes in the labor market, and also coming up with a suite of solutions and changes that they're making on the policy and regulatory front, and as well as the fact that they have a basic income pilot already underway in Ontario. But I'm sure other provincial governments are starting to look at the impact of the labor market changes as well, but are perhaps not as far along, or it's not as high a priority. And I think the federal government understands that people are struggling, and they've identified the need to connect Canadians to their benefits, not leave it up to individuals, but to try to do more outreach and really make sure people are getting the income that they're entitled to. There's also been mentioned of potentially a federal basic income pilot. So we're very interested in having this issue being incorporated into the thinking about a national poverty reduction strategy that they're starting to put together. But also think that there's a really important role for the federal government and Statistics Canada and the Bank of Canada in setting up mechanisms to actually track this issue going forward and its impacts, because it seems to be having such a fundamental impact on people's lives and their ability to move forward. And finally, I'd say the financial institutions are all very interested in finding ways to harness technology to create new tools and supports for people to better manage their finances. So I think you'll see a lot happening on that front in the next few years. And that's something that we're hopeful that with new apps and platforms, et cetera, that these are things that frontline community providers will be able to connect their clients to as well, and give them tools that can help them.
That's great. Yeah, we'll look forward to seeing what comes in those sectors. Liz, this might be a little bit of overlap from the last question, but who do we know of right now who's researching this issue in Canada, or do we know of anyone researing?
Well, I think the TD Bank is very interested in this issue, so we're hopeful that they'll continue moving forward with research on this. It's been hard to find anybody else, partly because we don't collect any data. So really the only data, apart from soliciting Canadians' opinions on this, really resides in within our financial institutions, in the bank accounts themselves, and the income and expense flows through those. But we're hoping that we've got some funding to do some research looking at changes in pathways to financial security, and we will be hosting a research symposium to showcase some of the research from the United States and some of the hopefully emerging research on this issue in Canada to policymakers in our leading public research institutions. So we're hoping we can galvanize some interest and get some new research underway.
We've got a few more questions coming in. Thank you everyone. We're going to get to as many as we can in the next 10 to 12 minutes or so. Someone's asking about more about you mentioned about debt and lending as being sort of a parallel concern. And we have a question: can you expand on the concerns about small dollar lenders, or are there better small dollar lenders that people can turn to as opposed to payday lenders?
Sure. This is a really important issue, particularly for low and modest income families. So we have seen a rise in use of payday lenders, and interestingly, not just amongst low and modest income families, but actually right up the income scale. And we did a look back over 12 years, I guess, up until 2015 was the latest data we had. And it actually showed that the most rapidly expanding group of payday loan users was in the second highest income quintile. So these are upper middle income people. So the interesting thing about income volatility is it affects households right up the income scale. And even though low-income people have less margin for maneuver financially because they often don't have a lot of savings, we know that many people, even middle or higher, upper middle income, may be living right at the edge of their income in terms of their expenses, their fixed expenses. So they can also run into real trouble. In terms of, we do know, though, for low and modest income that there's a dearth of access to affordable, good quality small credit, small dollar credit. Some credit unions have started to experiment with providing alternatives to payday loans. Some of these are business products, so they're commercial products where they are making a profit on them. Other ones are philanthropic investments, so they're not making any money. They're investing resources, but because they see a community need and they want to fill the gap. There's a question out there whether there is capacity to provide small dollar loans to people who don't have great credit scores that may be riskier lending prospects in a viable way as a business product. That being said, where we're seeing really interesting innovation in the United States, that would be great if we could see more of it here in Canada, is in new ways to evaluate somebody's creditworthiness. So looking at, because if we broaden out the ways that we measure creditworthiness, you suddenly see that some people are actually creditworthy, they just haven't been able to establish it within the framework that we've traditionally used to assess credit. So if we can broaden that out and be a little more innovative, it may be that more people have access to mainstream sources of small credit than do now.
So we're looking for more solutions in that area, I guess.
Absolutely.
From our financial providers.
Absolutely.
That's great. Liz, we've got a couple of questions here. Now, there's a bit of a lengthy question here. Someone's asking about, so given that there's a lot of macroeconomic pressures leading towards these conditions, and that those are coming from disruption in our industries, and it's combined with the fact that our governments have more challenge increasing our social safety net. Are there other strategies besides those things that can offer solutions? So if we weren't, like, I guess this question is asking, so if we weren't able to look to solutions from our governments and our employment industries, where else could solutions come from?
I think there's still more that employers can do. I think a lot of them aren't fully aware of the impact their changes in employment practices have had. So I think, whereas I don't think we're going to see a big shift back to a lot of permanent full-time jobs, I think you can see them where they can afford to making changes, or understanding that in a labor market where it's going to be harder and harder, they're going to have to compete more and more for good quality people, that providing good quality employment conditions to them is going to be a competitive edge in the labor market. So I think you're going to see some employers going, well, we want to try and support our employees better. I think technology offers a lot of opportunities to help people smooth, and offers employers more options in how they flow income to people. So if you've already worked a day's work, can you access that money right away rather than having to wait 2 weeks to your pay period? So I think there's lots of things that can be done there. And in terms of technology and artificial intelligence enabled tools for consumers to be able to manage, juggling finances when you have multiple streams of income, all of which are unpredictable, involves trying to make very complex and many trade-off decisions all day long, all week long, all month long, without adequate information. What technology tools that have machine learning built in can do is they can see patterns that you can't. They can make calculations that you find very onerous and difficult and don't have time to do. They can do them in a split second. And tools like that can start to provide real-time advice to consumers about, okay, it looks like you're going over your spending target here in this budget category, but here are 3 options for how you can make it up elsewhere at this point in the month and other areas of your budget if you want to go ahead with that anyhow. So those types of supports can be really effective at helping people do a much better job at managing day to day. But I don't think we should close the door on policy solutions either. I think the world is changing fundamentally in the labor market, and we need to be open to looking at fundamental rethinks on our safety net as well. But
so let's look for solutions anywhere they can come from.
We have to look at all levels. I think we have to look at all levels. We should really take as comprehensive an approach as we can here.
But it is exciting to think, maybe someone's listening who has a technology connection that, an exciting app could come out of the
I think there are lots of them coming out already.
These are great questions, everyone. Thank you. We're gonna take a couple more. What do you think about the idea of communities developing asset building programs that are for people who are most at risk? Is that a potential solution as well?
Absolutely. Anything that we can do to help people build up some liquid savings is a really important way to help and very effective. So people who have some savings are much less likely to become financially unstable, and it gives them the flexibility they need to smooth those income and expense gaps. Because what we're talking about for a lot of people, it's not that their annual income has gone down, it's just that the flow is so unpredictable. So if their annual income is the same, then savings is what gives you that flexibility to actually smooth and cover off dips. So I think
that could be
very important part of the solution.
And we'd certainly be interested to hear more if you know about any of these exact kinds of programs. That's a great question. We have another question asking about potential solutions that could come from the area of government. Because you mentioned the challenges of sitting on a 1-800 number to try to report if you're filing for EI. This is a reality for you if you're filing for other programs. You know about navigating the system like that. Could a simple solution come from increasing the number of frontline staff in contact with these people who are on hold? Wouldn't that be a big benefit?
I think you could do that, or you could even think about redesigning how you calculate the benefit, and letting people just continue the benefit, but having it net out in their taxes at the end of the year is a more efficient solution than trying to. I don't want to argue against making sure that government phone lines are properly equipped so that we don't go crazy when we call. But at the same time, I think some of this can be addressed at the design of the actual benefit and how you and how frequently you assess eligibility. Maybe it's every 6 months there's a correction or something. So rather than every month. So.
That's great. Thank you, Liz. We've got time for one more question, I think, and then we'll move towards our wrap up here. Is there a role for people on the front line, for people working in frontline community organizations, beyond what they're already doing day to day? Is there a role for them to play, with how they change or adapt their financial supports, how they adapt the knowledge that they're giving to their clients who are struggling with this?
Sure. I think there's a number of things that we can do. So first of all, integrating some basic financial education can be helpful, but a lot of traditional financial education, which emphasizes things like budgeting and saving and stuff, is still premised on the notion that you know how much money is coming into your door every month. So one of the things we'll be doing is trying to do the research necessary to understand what's changed for people, and then turn that into advice for financial educators on how we need to update our curriculum and the approaches and what we're teaching people so that it's more relevant for the real context of their financial life, which is more and more volatility. But I think anything that frontline organizations can do to help connect people to tax filing and getting their benefits is very important, and also to helping people to save. I think, one of the things that we're working on at Prosper Canada is looking at large-scale services and programs that already exist in communities and saying, how can we build these elements into more of them? So it's an integral part of, if you're providing social housing, if you're providing mental health services or healthcare, if you're providing social assistance, these should be things that are built in, because we know that the vast majority of low-income people and modest income are grappling with these issues and that affect them, and they need support. And we already have a lot of infrastructure. We're spending a lot of money providing services. If we can simply integrate these components into them, and there are a lot of proven models for doing that with great evidence behind them of a real impact. So, and it has what we call the super vitamin effect. Not only does it help people improve their financial outcomes, but typically it helps those programs improve their outcomes as well. So you build it into an employment program, people will have better employment outcomes as well, or more housing stability in a housing program. So, and people are interested. There's some evidence on our website on this, but this is something definitely that folks can think about if they're delivering other services.
Thank you so much, Liz. And thank you, everyone, for those questions. I know that there are a few that we didn't get a chance to get to, and we really thank you for your interest and your curiosity. And I think that's a really great range of questions that you brought us, leading us to do some more thinking, I think, as well, and just opening up how many potential areas solutions can come from in this field, I think, is a really great note to end on. But we want to make sure that you're leaving with some great suggestions for where to go for more information about what we've talked about. So when you get the slides in your email, you'll see all of these links to all of these reports, but you can also make a note of these titles and do some quick Googling, and you'll come up with all of these resources. So the key research report that we've been talking about from TD, Pervasive and Profound, this was released just this summer, and that's available online from TD Bank Group. The Aspen Institute research, they have a breadth of resources, but these two that we've been referring to today are probably the best places to get started. Income Volatility, a Primer, and Managing the Swings. There is another batch of research from JP Morgan Chase, a large financial institution in the US. They have a great deal of data reporting on the financial ups and downs of US individuals. And finally, for a wealth of really personalized household level data and stories, please check the U.S. Financial Diaries. They have quite a bit of research developed over many years about the realities of different households and the picture that income volatility paints for their lives. So please visit these if you're looking for more. And if you know of more resources in this area, we're very happy to hear about them and share them.
Just to let people know, the U.S. Financial Diaries is an extraordinary resource, and they're really the ones who broke this issue wide open in the United States. And it's transformed policy thinking about how you build household financial stability in the United States. The other resource that isn't up here, but a place you might want to look, is the Pew Charitable Trust, PEW, in the United States, also has a major research program in this area, and they've got a lot of great resources on their website as well.
Great, thanks, Liz. We'll see if we can include that in the slides before we send them out to everyone. So thank you once again for joining us. You will receive the slides and a link to our video recording after we conclude in the next couple of days. And if you'd like to catch up on any of our past webinars, please visit our website. You may be interested to hear more of the topics that you might have missed if this is your first webinar in our series that you've visited. Finally, please keep in touch. We would love to keep you apprised of any new events, new resources, new information that we can share with you. If you visit our website, you will have the opportunity to subscribe to our newsletter, which is the best way to keep in touch, and we look forward to doing that with you. So please visit us online, visit us on social media, and send us a message if there's any more questions that we can answer for you. So thank you again for sharing your time with us today. It's been a pleasure to share our time with you, and we look forward to joining you next time. Have a great day.
Thank you very much.